Welcome to StaffBuffalo's Pain Points podcast, where we unravel the complexities of staffing, human resources, and other challenges faced by businesses today.
Welcome to the Pain Points podcast. Right now we have Ryan O'Connor from Primacy Financial, and he's been doing it for roughly 15 years in the financial advisory space, and your parent company is Northwestern Mutual. And why don't you tell us how you really forged your career? How did you get here, and what pathway did you take?
The pathway I took was to become the black sheep of my family, starting pre-med, realizing I did not like biology and I liked chemistry and all the math courses, and I felt like I was the only one. So I took economics classes in high school and did very well. Always liked that discipline, so I changed my major after my first semester. The financial crisis happened. I studied economics during college, and then I thought it was a great time to go into the financial services industry post the financial crisis. So I pretty much operated as a sole practitioner with one employee for about 5 years. Then I shared space and staff with another advisor for another 3 or 4 years. And the last really 3 to 4 years of my career, I've acquired 3 different internal in my firm financial advisor practices, grown and developed a lot of staff. So we have multi-discipline team-based practice now. I'm the managing partner and majority owner. And that's really how I got to where I am today.
Awesome. And what disciplines do you cover? Kind of a high-level approach.
Yeah, so most of our business is fee-based wealth management. We do written financial plans for a fee that's just objective advice. We do insurance planning, and more recently, we've been getting in the institutional space, whether it's pension plans, cash balance plans, 401ks, and some employee benefits.
Awesome. Now, how did you name your business?
Primacy Financial, actually, we work with a marketing firm that gave us a bunch of names, and I think marketing firms are really good at being creative, but sometimes a little bit too creative. My industry is very conservative, and I didn't want to go as we're adding partners that add the names and get one of those very long kind of traditional law firm or accounting firm names. So it originated from a book that I read after getting a bunch of name suggestions that I didn't care for. It was Client Primacy, which is about putting the client first. And it's, preeminence utmost important to our clients. So really centering our practice around clients' needs and helping people where they're at, as opposed to focusing on something that you might be trying to accomplish through your business. And really that kind of came to the name origin, and it's currently under, actually we have I believe a state trademark, but it's under a federal trademark precedent.
Awesome. Well, that's wonderful. So tell us, what is, if you could even define one of your larger pain points that you've gone through within your career of growing the businesses, adding people, adding partners, and continuing to grow?
So that's a great question.
Good question.
Yeah, the biggest pain points, early in the career is just kind of making it in the business. That's not really too unique, but I would say more recently I've actually had more pain points or struggles in, especially getting through the pandemic. The first acquisition I made to buy a practice was in 2020, which was a very uncertain time. Obviously, that was a pain point, navigating that, and it wasn't a planned handoff. So that was a little bit challenging just to meet people without that kind of runway that you might get acquiring another business, which would be more ideal. And
so it was more of a sudden switch of hands, and you had to be like, okay, and introduce yourself almost at the first day almost?
Yes.
Wow,
and
okay.
In addition to doing that, continuing to grow and hire employees as our practice got more significant, and then running the business while at the same time working in the business as an advisor. That has been probably the biggest challenge, managing people along with running the business and still working as an advisor and trying to find what balance, and also to delegate what functions that I'm not good at per se.
How do you identify what you're not good at? Do you naturally know that, or do you have to walk through a process? Is it a learning experience for you?
Yeah, I'm sure what I'm not good at, because I avoid it like the plague. So I tend to focus on things that I'm good at or am interested in, which are usually one and the same. So my biggest challenge, which I've become better at, is managing people or reviewing employee expectations or even creating them. So that has been my probably biggest learning curve. I would say I'm not exceptionally good at it, but I've become fairly good at it. But my other business partner, Deanna, is admittedly much better. So I've delegated a lot of that with more of our operations staff and not client-facing staff. So the people that I oversee are generally more on the advisor side as opposed to the back office or operations team.
Great. So your strength is obviously kind of, hey, this is how I do it. This is kind of the pathways to success, and really growing those other advisors so that they can add to, the revenue of the business.
Yes, it's trying to create a similar experience, even though you have multiple different
Mhm.
clients over periods of time or advisors, to have a similar feel where if someone comes in and works with another advisor, it's not going to be dissimilar from someone else on the team.
And then how do you create that consistency throughout? Do you do different meetings? Do you have, different values and mission that you stick to?
Yeah, I think part of that is just the culture of doing what's in the best interest. A lot of what we do is advice first before we make any recommendations or just coming up with an objective financial plan. And then it's really just creating best practices, statement of procedures more on the back and compliance aspect. We don't do a lot of transactional type work. So it's easy for us to replicate what we do. And it's also, making sure you have an open, collaborative approach where people have questions or someone's, learning something. They have someone that has been doing it longer that they can lean on to ask questions and get some help if they're unsure or haven't seen something before.
That's great. Yeah. So just creating kind of that growth within the organization and that teamwork overall,
Yeah.
which is great. So you mentioned earlier that kind of everyone in your family was more of the math brain, but you really like the economic side. So I also know that you're kind of a man of history as well. You enjoy reading, you enjoy all of that. So how do you overall utilize all of your interests and kind of pull it into what you do day to day?
I think I find it very history just interesting, and it's not something that's extremely well known, which is kind of surprising. But I think you can find, especially in economics and trends in capital markets over long periods of time, there are trends and things that generally happen. Some have greater correlation than others. So I think understanding maybe socioeconomics, not just capital markets or economics, is helpful to have that perspective when you're looking at a situation in real time. There are not exact situations, obviously, but there's similar patterns and things. And I think that's helpful to, one, still have the perspective of the longer term. I think most humans are short-term oriented, especially in the, information age that we live in. It's very challenging for anyone to think really longer term. So that's, in general, what we do is help people accomplish longer term goals while still maintaining their lifestyle or short term focus. So yeah, I'm more math and side of the brain, logical or whatnot. Everyone in my family, for the most part, is either a medical professional or a teacher.
Yeah.
So even in my extended family, so I'm very much the black sheep. But
It's okay. You're doing great with it. So you also mentioned it's a hard industry, especially to get up and running. So what do you see within people that generally is like, oh, they may be very good at this job, or oh, maybe this is not the right fit for you? Do you have a clear, hey, this just seems to consistently not work out. This seems to work really well.
Yeah, those are multifaceted. So if we're talking about advisors in the business, a lot of times more youthful advisors might struggle with someone working with them that feel like they have enough experience.
Mm.
So that is something that I feel like offer a lot of value because you can work as an advisor through a team as opposed to just starting your own practice, which does have struggles, challenges, both because you're doing everything yourself, learning, including, the paperwork, the administration, and it's a very regulated industry. So it's become a lot harder, obviously, over time to operate as a sole practitioner. On the operations side, organization and being, self managed, if you will. My philosophy of managing people is the more you have to manage someone, the less likely they are to be a good. So, and I don't like to micromanage, let alone manage at all. I think that you have the right people that are driven the right way. No questions is not good. Too many questions is also not good. So I think that, confidence enough to know that you can do something or find the answer yourself, whether it's calling our home office or looking something up first before you solicit a team member's help. Those are the things I kind of look at, because if you over rely on having someone get you the answers as opposed to find them yourself, it's kind of the teach a person to fish versus giving someone a fish analogy.
So especially, early in your career, and this is very similar to what I learned in public accounting, you almost have to write down your list and X them off as you go, because a lot of times you can answer your own questions. And then those larger questions you can bring to management or higher up for more of those larger discussions, which I can look. So tell us a few instances or maybe something that you learned some pain points of hiring. So maybe just bad hires where you're just like that was just missing the mark, or maybe just some general advice that you wouldn't do again.
I can't say that I've had an experience with bad hires. It's maybe just hiring the wrong people in the wrong roles, or thinking that there's a role that really is full time that ended up not being. So anything that I would classify as bad hire, I would really look at myself, and that was a mistake or a learning experience for me personally. I think it's more of a personality fit more than anything. Any employee we have, I can say anything bad about them as people. I think it's just either having the wrong position or having the wrong personality match for a position. So those have been learning experiences or pain points, perhaps.
Yes, thank you. And then in general, how do you decipher if you're, working with people that are maybe trainable or if you just move them into a separate spot where they can truly thrive? I mean, just from an operations of the company, kind of shifting people around and truly identifying where they might be the best fit.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you're really great employees. The best question I love as an employer is, what else can I help with?
Yes.
Okay, how can I give you a raise fast enough? Right? It's my response usually. But I do look at any employee that's taking on more responsibility is due for a merit increase, right? You try to be very generous with benefits. You do not want to lose good employees in this environment, or I'd say any environment, because those hidden costs are very much a distraction and a problem of any organization of any size. So our employees that are excelling have taken on more responsibility and gotten generous, merit raises, etc. So those are something you look for, is what is adjacent to someone's role. You don't want to spread someone too thin. What we really done, I think, an exceptional job on, and where we excel as an organization is our operational efficiency, is making sure people are specialized in their role and not taking on something that's completely not similar to their role, or more importantly, similar to their skill sets, getting the right people in the right positions. So now we have a little bit more of a process on personality assessments to make sure it's a good fit for whether it's a support role or an advisor role or something else within our organization.
And do you actually use personality assessments then, like actual the systems?
Yeah, we use 16 personalities, which are
I use that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's I find it very helpful. It's pretty accurate. There's other more technical tests and things that oftentimes we'll use once someone's already in a role, but I feel like that one's pretty high level of someone's personality. So just making sure they're more broadly a good fit for that role.
And especially if they agree with, oh yeah, that this is very similar to how I act, how I respond, it does make it a little bit easier to communicate. So whether it's like from management or trying to pull information out of them as they're, getting used to working together, it makes it a lot easier to understand where people are and meet them where they are. So how do you differentiate yourself within the financial advisory space? So whether it's marketing, whether it's within the community, how do you differentiate your organization?
It's a hard thing to do, because at the end of the day, the heart of what we do, there's a lot of people in that space. So without getting kind of underneath the surface of what we do different on the wealth management side, what we do more high level difference is we really meet people where they are. And talking about pain points, if I'm talking to someone that's a new prospect, I'll ask them especially if they're a business owner, what's giving you most frustration? And usually that's just a way to learn their organization. I think sometimes the best recommendations solve multiple problems. So if their problem might be something that isn't necessarily related to something that we do, it might be adjacent to that, or something that they didn't know could be done more efficiently, whether it's, benefits or things, or it might just be, they've never really, took time to think about their personal plan if they're in the business. Everything's about the business and they haven't really done that work. So a lot of what we do that separates us is we essentially charge a fee just for advice to help people with a multitude of different things over a period of time without really making any recommendations on, whether it be investments or other products, if you will.
That's great. So you truly guide them of, okay, have you thought about this? Have you looked into that? And really giving them the knowledge that they didn't know because they're so focused on the business. They're so focused on whatever in their personal lives that you're like, well, I'm going to take that off your plate because this is what we do for a living.
Correct. And a lot of, especially business owners, but everyone that has had maybe not a good experience with a financial advisor just tends to be too transactional or not really focused on helping them in a comprehensive way with.
That's awesome. And now, how do you give back to the community? How do you have your employees? How do you encourage your staff to volunteer? Anything like that?
Yeah, most of our employees are involved in nonprofit organizations or charitably inclined. We give to a lot of different organizations. I'm president on a local board. I serve on a couple subcommittees of other organizations. Give to a few organizations a year that are important to us. And I would say, Buffalo is a small enough place, and there's a lot of work that you can do, good work that you can do, either whether it's volunteering your time. I would say I'm at this point in my life trying to have a little bit more, work-life balance. I'm more inclined to give money than time.
Hey, there's a place for that as well.
But 5+ years ago, I was more inclined to give time than money because I didn't have as much discretionary money.
And you had more time back then.
But I think it's important to have a community presence in any service organization in particular.
That's great. Now, back to the work-life balance. How do you fill that bucket? How do you fill the balance bucket up?
That's a very good question. I have historically been very bad at that. I think I didn't go on a real vacation for like a week long. I think for the first, I don't even know, 7 years of my career.
Like out of office and everything on?
Yeah. So it's pretty.
How many days did it take you to ease into it?
Well, I took a lot of short trips and time off, but it was very challenging because I was still very much doing everything in the business. I've had a couple, good employee hires that's allowed me to do that, but I'm still, I wouldn't say struggling, but trying to navigate the time that I spend in the business versus running the business. Mm-hmm. I think work-life balance to me is really just now at this point in my life and some things I've experienced, just a matter of prioritizing it. It's really easy not to do it, but it takes a committed effort. And I found if you ask for help, if you have an organization, or now I think what the pandemic really did is people are a lot more comfortable working remotely. So this August, I think it's going to be the first time I try to work almost exclusively remotely. I'm going to take maybe 2 weeks off in a row.
Wow.
So I've never done that before. So we'll see how that works. And I think also things come up that are urgent. So in order to have work-life balance, especially if you run a business, you have to be willing to say, oh, I can, on my vacation, I can take a pause or take a call or take a meeting if something is urgent. So it's having that ability. It doesn't mean you're completely unplugged, but you're prioritizing time with your family or just time away from the business. So to me, it's not about an all or nothing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's more common if you're an owner of an organization, an employee where you have PTO and you might have a larger organization where people can more easily backfill your work, so to speak.
Yeah, no, that makes tons of sense. And that'd be wonderful. I hope you get the 2 weeks.
It's good.
Goals, yes. Good for you. And now, how do you manage a remote staff or a hybrid staff?
So we don't. For regulatory reasons, we're required to work 50% or more in an office. For supervising reasons, I think that was a recent re-change back to normalcy since the pandemic, because that was, of course, relaxed during. We have flex hours, so employees can request usually not more than a day or 2 a week. For remote work. We don't have any employees that work exclusively remotely. We don't discourage it, but we do expect people to come into the office the majority of the time. But if something comes up, if someone's childcare falls through, or then those are good reasons where if someone's not client facing and they're operational, it's like, okay, yeah, thanks. You work remotely. Thanks for letting me know, kind of thing. So those are flexibility. We do have summer hours and things like that. So I think we have a pretty good work-life balance culture too. Just because I haven't been good at it historically doesn't mean it's not something that I value or prioritize for my employees.
And that helps with retention, I'm sure. And especially as things change and as, like you mentioned, since COVID, things happen all the time, especially with childcare, elderly care, anything to that effect, where people just may need a few hours. And it's so much easier nowadays for them even to request it. So I want to talk more about hiring for your team and truly delegating so that you can continue to elevate yourself and your organization. So how do you identify what to actually delegate and what to retain?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think over time, in what has worked really well is delegating the operational aspects, the compliance, the paperwork, the administration. I did that very early in my practice, which worked. as things have gotten more involved and complex now, we have multiple more team members on that space. So I don't involve myself. I know how that works because I've been in the business long enough, but my business partner, Deanna, really runs that side of the house and manages the employees on that. So I have little to no involvement. Unless there's some type of change where I'll reevaluate or they'll solicit my questions of how we should do something or update the process like that. The more recent challenge or pain point has been trying to find a way to delegate service to our growing clients while still focusing my time on things that I can't as easily hire out, which is managing the business and the nuances of that, as well as business development and working with some of our more complex clients. And what I've been delegating more is more of the client service or the touch points that tend to be more frequent, but also we are very unique in that our operations staff is fully trained and licensed. So we are able to have them do a lot of the service that isn't big picture planning. So how we've delegated that, or I guess created a structure, is our advisors help with the big picture plan and our operations staff helps with the day-to-day client service for the most part. That, as it grows and evolves over time, how we get business now is more from COIs, whether it might be accountants, attorneys, or introductions from clients, and me focusing more on cultivating those relationships and focusing my time in that space. So finding the right balance and not having a radical shift at any point. And I think that just comes over time with introducing more members of the team. So clients get familiar and it just becomes more seamless over time.
And I know you mentioned that there's so many pain points within the regulations surrounding your industry. So are there a lot of opportunities to use technologies to streamline things? I know with AI, for example, a lot of industries are using it a lot. Can you utilize that within your industry at all? Or is it kind of touch and go point? Are there other technologies that you can't use that you know other businesses can use that?
Yeah, our parent firm is very good with the compliance structure and being up to date with all the regulations. They do have approved technologies that we can use versus not use. And I think that creates a lot of understanding and similarities within the parent firm brand. I wouldn't say regulation is a pain point. It's just the presence in the industry. And there's a lot of industries, not just ours, that are regulated. The pain points are the increased regulation isn't through the same agency. So new agencies are getting involved. States are getting more involved. New York State isn't the easiest state to work in. Surprise, surprise.
You don't say.
So in a lot of those new changes are challenged in the courts. They don't speak to each other, and they also don't really have a good application in our practice model. As a CFP practitioner, I'm a fiduciary, so they don't really make any distinction on that. And even individual companies might have different interpretations of that regulation. So that's very challenging. However, it's increased importance, and we have our recent compliance review was like squeaky clean. So I take zero credit for that. That was mostly my operations staff.
Which is great. That means you're hiring correctly.
Yes. And then having procedures and things that are replicable, I feel like is important, especially navigating regulations that are always good, well-intentioned, but sometimes have unintended consequences that aren't favorable always to the consumer or practitioners.
So throughout your career, you've obviously grown and grown and grown. So what have some pain points been surrounding your growth, and how do you continue to grow? What are your plans to continue to grow in the future?
Yeah, good question. I think the answer to that is at this point, not focusing on growth as the only objective. I think sometimes the best growth strategy is making sure that your current clients are really happy and well serviced and not losing clients when you get to a certain size. So it's not that we're not trying to grow or help more people. It's just trying to grow in the right ways that are very similar and adjacent to the types of people that we feel like we can add the most value to. So it's more of changing or pivoting our growth to not focus on just crazy growth because we're a fairly decent size at this point, but also making sure that it's the right kind of growth. Because if you have the wrong kind of growth, you can add types of things that you're not familiar with, or it's not as scalable. So what we focus on is really who our target audience is, who we feel like we can help the most in our practice, and growing strategically through existing clients and partnerships we have with other practitioners that have similar type practices, if you will.
His reputation is key. And Buffalo, the community, Western New York, the whole area, everyone's related to everybody else. Everyone's connected. So really just ensuring that your current clients are speaking your praises, that the accountants, lawyers, everyone is still referring you business because your organization is consistent, because it is going to deliver the same results every single time and better. Is that pretty much how you can continue to grow?
Yeah, I think personal reputation in business, I think, especially if you're in a service-based business, is extremely important. I think also, I've always been the person to try to say what I mean and mean what I say. So I think being consistent and, now I've been in the industry long enough, when you make promises and commitments to people and you keep them, people tend to appreciate that. And that's really how you develop goodwill or trust over time. And I would say about a third of our clients are actually outside of the Buffalo area, which is something that we embrace because Buffalo, as much as I've born and raised here, it's a very charming city, has a lot of personality. It does have some limitations and isn't known as the most business forward city. I think the small business culture, though, in Buffalo is really great. And that is something I have always enjoyed and is something that we embrace in our practice model and our skill sets. But we're certainly not limited to working with people in Buffalo. But I think we always have an emphasis of focusing on local, but we also have an increased presence outside of the Western New York and Buffalo area.
Awesome. Now, speaking of kind of networking, getting out there and within the community and with developing your staff members to identify sales opportunities, etc., what type of networking opportunities or what types of groups have you joined, boards have you joined, or anything like that? Any kind of advice that you want to give people to be able to network, to increase their sales in a very forward thinking and very long-term thought process of having those clients long-term, retaining them, etc., so that it's not like a quick sales transaction, but more of developing those relationships?
Yeah. That is something I feel like our current structure really facilitates, is our process of sales, if you will, or recommendations is not quick. It's really not transactional. Everyone gets paid sales side or advisor side a salary. So which is different than the industry. There's still a lot of what we call churn and burn where, firms, and this isn't, dissimilar from my parent firm, but they hire people and it's more sales or transactional based and more quick. And I've never really gravitated towards that. I actually really struggled in the industry because I had a longer approach because I'm not really that sales oriented. I'm not unwilling to talk to people, and I'm not extremely outgoing, but outgoing enough, I suppose. And I've always not really liked that part. So I've tried to, now when you have more established practice, nothing needs to be rushed and things. So we try to have that differentiation factor within our practice model. So I think if you just, again, rush people and you tend to become a consistent process and make objective recommendations, people tend to feel more comfortable and, build that trust that's required for long-term relationships.
That's great. Are there any specific organizations or meetups or anything now that people are kind of post-COVID and people are kind of getting back out into different networking opportunities, different spaces? Do you have any kind of top ones that you would recommend to maybe a younger generation who's coming up within your industry?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I don't spend a lot of time in networking events. Buffalo
But you
Niagara,
probably used to.
I did. Yeah.
Me too.
Buffalo Niagara sales and marketing is something that I've
Yes.
got involved in as an organization more recently. I like that because I like organizations that tend to be more holistic and have multiple disciplines or people where you can learn things. So it's not just about networking for business purposes, but it's about expanding, what you know about certain industries. I think that's really important. And I've had a lot of relationships over time that I've met people through things like that. I think a lot of our growth strategy focuses on certain markets and using our expertise and knowledge to do presentations and being involved in more professional organizations to give lectures or speak or get asked to speak at certain things. That tends to be our focus, as opposed to, and we're involved in chambers, but that's not really something that we're super active in. But I think there's no bad way to network. It's just a matter of getting out there. I feel like a lot of people are it's hard. It's something that I'm more familiar with. I wasn't really good at that. I think I might be a little bit more extroverted now than I used to be, but I self-described introvert for most of my life. And I've kind of maybe like 50-50 now. So I think it's just a matter of challenging yourself because you have to, it's something you have to do. You got to get out of your comfort zone. And I mean, anything to, yeah, and that doesn't have to do with my business, any business. You have to be willing to do things that you might be uncomfortable with. And that's actually probably the biggest pain point of hiring is you have a mindset of, especially with the more, and I would say young generation, even my age or younger, and I was, I guess, brought up in a household where my father was self-employed. So I guess I had a different upbringing or experience, but where people just only do what they're comfortable with and are more entitled and feel like it's, if they don't like it, they don't have to do it, which is like, we hear this in an increasing area with, frustration with employees and thinking that, they really have the control to come and go when they please and just kind of misaligned expectations. I think that's a function of the work from home, tight labor market, colleges changing with, what they're telling people or, not training them adequately for the
Who knows what
workforce.
they're doing?
Yeah. So I think it's challenging to find the right type of employees, but I think I've got past a certain point where I have high expectations, but we have a really good company compensation benefit structure. So my philosophy is don't settle for average employees, have high expectations, and you'll attract the right people.
I like that. And then how do you filter that out? How do you understand or how do you identify if someone is going to be a very hard worker and very successful versus going to just tell you that in the interview and then barely show up while at work?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. I'm only chuckling because I tend to be I don't come across this way always, but like a very trusting and caring person. I tend to keep people along in all aspects of my life when something isn't working too long and, just having the expectation someone will figure it out or change, if you will. And I think what I've learned, not necessarily a jaded way, but people tend not to change all that much, especially the older that they get. So, or the longer they are in an organization, expecting someone to change is probably not going to happen. So I think it's important to have expectations from the get-go that are realistic. And then, the age-old saying, hire slow, fire quickly, I think is very much a accurate assessment. And the reason I was somewhat snickering is because I had a conversation with my business partner and saying, when you bring on an employee, it should be a gestational cycle, which she's been on and off pregnant, is on maternity leave now, that you shouldn't keep on someone that's struggling or not meeting or exceeding expectations beyond 9 months.
9 months is very generous, by the way.
Yeah. Well, 9 months
I say 90 days.
90 days. Yeah. I would say 90 days is a performance improvement plan. And then beyond that. So 9 months was, the very, very longest. Yeah. Well, like I said, that was recent development, but I think it's always challenging because you offer someone a position, you might like that person, but business is different than personal relationships.
Mm-hmm. And even you mentioned it before, even that person, they might not even be in the right seat, but they might be in the wrong industry, so they might be able to do something well in that specific seat, but they might not be impassioned about the industry. You know what I mean? So if you find someone that doesn't like the industry that you operate within, then they're never going to enjoy it.
Yes, that's very true. I think you have to have a interest, especially in my industry, a passion for that. But I think it goes beyond an interest or a passion even. You have to have that enough where you have to really take ownership beyond just liking your job. It's making sure that you're exceeding and adding to an organization. So I think sometimes what I've noticed is when employees ask questions about how we're doing or have general interest in the company, when there's a disconnect, especially with some old employers, how the company is doing and how someone feels in their role, that's a problem. Mm-hmm. Because someone feels really good in their role and the company's not doing so well, that's a problem. And the reverse is also true. If the company's doing really well and someone doesn't really feel good in their role, that's a problem. And that's when you have, I think, a mismatch between the vision of an organization and an employee's satisfaction. So those always have to kind of flow in the same direction. So, and an employee doing certain tasks that are asked, a requirement of employment, it's not that they're exceeding, it's the above and beyond that those types of things add long-term value to some. And I think the best employees understand that the more they're adding value to the organization is the more enjoyment, satisfaction, and compensation they're going to get out of their particular role.
I completely agree. And I think that people are innately that way. Sometimes when they're what can I do? What can I do? Can I help you more? I have this great idea. Let's discuss it. And those people are so valuable to every organization because they're going to bring in fresh ideas, and not only ideas, but they're going to help you implement the ideas, because you can only have so many visionaries. You have to have some people that actually implement the ideas. So having those people that will actually run with it and go forward with it and not stop every few minutes, or stop when they just hit a wall and never bring it up again. Those are one of my biggest pet peeves. Do you have any pet peeves you'd like to discuss?
When all is said and done, more is said than done, right?
Yes,
I
yes.
think it's that mindset. I've always like been like a worker bee, so I don't really I'm like on a committee. I'll do the work. I'll take a project and run with it or something like that. So I like doers. It's great to have ideas and vision. We're in an industry though, you don't really have to reinvent the wheel. You have to do something more creative and differently in a space. Perhaps. So I think that is more of the art of our business, but it is a very technical industry. So it's not one that necessarily needs a lot of creativity.
But you can get creative within the parameters, within the confines.
You can. Yeah. We've had, I think all of our employees have added ideas or contributions that we've made as far as our, processes and best practices. So it's just recognizing that something could be done more efficiently. So that's why I think our operations staff is really second to none. And what we've been fortunate of is we have longstanding good employees that are our organization. If we've leased out our employees to other advisors that either have had turnover or high cost areas where you had to hire someone for $70,000 starting salary out of college with no experience. Buffalo, but in those coastal cities where it's $3,000 a month to rent a 700 square foot shoebox that's the reality in a lot of these larger coastal areas. So, and then also we found lends itself to other strategic work, whether it's helping with another advisor that might not have the expertise to work on something that they weren't familiar with and the comfort level to bring to the table. So we've tried to grow in other areas of working synergistically with other advisors, mostly within our actually exclusively within our organization.
So you've identified an opportunity to basically say that we have our operations down, and then you can fractionally outsource it based on whatever projects are coming in through certain.
Yeah, and we've done that based on relationships and introductions. We haven't formally had a plan to do that. It's just kind of people that I know in my parent company that I develop relationships with. Folks say, I just lost someone, I'm in a pinch or something along those lines. So that's sort of how they presented themselves. I don't know if that'll change over time, but it's also like a way to grow that's very different in the industry.
That's great. Yeah, especially because, like you said, everyone's licensed, so they know what they're doing. They can provide that support. But maybe they just have more of the introverted personality type, even, where they don't want to be in the external sales, but really enjoy taking care of the customer and delivering a superior result.
Yeah, most people on our operations team are more introverted than that. But I think introverts also get a bad rap.
I do too. I consider myself one.
They're definitely introverted. You put them in a group, but one-on-one, sometimes introverts won't stop talking. So it's more of the group aspect. Introverts tend to take a step back and aren't the most vocal, but one-to-one interactions are oftentimes they're the best listeners, they're the most attentive, they're the most supportive. Extroverts sometimes are, too much
about them.
Too much independence about them. Yeah.
To listen, really, and react. And a lot of times with true operational administrative support teams, the listening and the reacting and the thoughtfulness really goes a long way, especially as they see different aspects of the business that other people don't. So they can truly tie things together, which is really helpful.
Cool.
So Ryan, tell me a little bit about where you see your organization going, where you see your career ultimately going.
Yeah, I've been in the industry. I feel like it hasn't even been 15 years, but it's felt 30, probably because most of the early stages of my career, I worked probably 70 hours plus a week. So I feel like I've had a 30-year career already. So I'm approaching retirement.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I think where I see my role in skill sets changing is being involved in client relationships, but not being the sole person in those, and making sure that I can my role will change over time. And as it is now, running more of the business and training people and working on strategic relationships, I don't want to be removed from the client aspect fully, but our biggest hiring need is for other advisors and support people on that side. Operationally, we're very good. I think once that occurs, I think that's a prerequisite to grow further through acquisitions or strategic relationships that we have done really mostly in the last 3 to 5 years. which I think it had a lot of synergies and worked very well. That's really, we're in a transition point too. We still don't want to grow too quickly, but we also want to make sure we have the right people on the team. If we were to take on any more significant growth or acquisitions, we want to make sure that doesn't take away from our current clients' expectations of exemplary service and attention. So that's what we're focusing on the next couple of years, is really to shore up our current team and current client service before really venturing into other growth projects, if you will.
Great. Wonderful. So do you think you're primarily going to continue your steady growth with your current, and then if and when you're ready, you're going to continue to grow through acquisitions? Would you say that those are kind of your main growth points, and then you get everything set up again, and then you do another acquisition?
Yes, I think you don't want to acquire too quickly. If you look at any organization, big or small, there is risk to growing too quickly. A really good example is General Electric. They were a huge powerhouse and they were very good up until the turn of the century, and then started acquiring and doing things that were completely not even similar to their business model, and they just lost profitability, lost their focus. The book Good to Great is really a phenomenal book to read about sticking to what you're good at and focusing on that, and not getting too either vertical or horizontally growth where you're getting into things that you haven't historically done and they're not really profitable or require a lot of hires and it's not really your core competency, or too much vertical growth, you're taking on too much too quickly and you lose focus of your current clients. So it's just being very aware of that. But I would say, in an acquisition, you need to make sure there's a good year to 18 months to make sure things are working smoothly before taking on another venture. And I think we've been fairly good at doing that. So we're not currently seeking anything further at the moment, and really just looking to add one or two key people to our team the next year or two.
Great. Wonderful. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for being on the Pain Points podcast. Can you tell us where to find you?
Yeah, the easiest is our website, primacyfinancial.com. We also have Facebook, LinkedIn, and an Instagram page.
All right. So make sure you follow him and follow our Pain Points podcast, and we'll see you next episode.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Pain Points podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to follow us so you never miss out on future episodes.